Action, action.
Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman. Scott, was that robust enough and energetic enough for you this time?
I feel like we're just starting a run with a brand new pair of shoes. I'm Scott Warr, and we're back again today. This is a part 2 from last week's episode. So if you're listening to this and going, what was last week's episode? You probably didn't listen. So go back, listen to that one first. This one will make a lot more sense. Although it's probably a good standalone episode on its own. We're going to talk about 200 milers again today. This is part 2 with Sharman Ultra coaching coaches Ian Sharman and Annie Hughes. If you didn't listen to part 1, we better do a little bit of an introduction. Annie Hughes has been a coach at Ian's coaching site for about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. And she is the 200-mile expert on their coaching team. She has won, well, get this, Don. She not only has won Moab 240 and Cocodona 250, but she's also set course records at both of those courses. Now, I think you ran Moab the year that Courtney DeWalter just killed Moab 240. Was that the same year, Don?
Yes, yeah. I think she finished like 10 hours before me.
Well,
yeah.
Annie beat her. She has the course record right now. So
I don't I don't think I have the course record for Moab, but
what?
I do for Cocodona. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, crap. You don't need to edit that out, Ryan. Let's just edit out her saying that she doesn't own the course record. Let's give her bigger kudos. She's also won a lot of 100 milers, including Leadville, which Ian Sharman knows very well because he's run and won Leadville 4 times. He's actually run it more than 4 times, but he's won it 4 times. And he has 9 top 10 finishes at Western States. And the thing that he's embarrassed about, or not necessarily embarrassed about, but one of the facts that I love about Ian is if you take all of his Western States finishes, all 10 of them, and you add them all up, he has the fastest time for anyone that's run Western States 10 times. And we still think that he gets a special belt buckle for that. We're lobbying for that. Hopefully we can get a petition out later this week. But anyway, that was way too long of an introduction for part 2. We're welcoming you guys back. Thank you for coming back. We felt that since normally our episodes are 60 minutes long, and this is a 200-mile episode, it should be twice as long. So that's why we have 2 parts.
But, Scott, we lost our producer, Ryan, with that long introduction. He just threw his hands up and left completely. So let's get this thing kicked off.
Yeah, we're gonna start just out of the gate. We're gonna start talking about, in a 200-miler, there is required gear that you have to take. Some 100-milers, there's some required gear. But in 200, they take this very, very seriously because there could be very long stretches where you don't have an aid station. And so you need to pay very close attention to the gear, which adds a complexity to a 200. All this gear takes room and weight on your body. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Annie, talk to me about how you had to transition. When you transitioned to the 200-plus mile, how did you adapt to the extra gear that you had to take?
Yeah, I had to get, a bigger pack that could hold all the gear comfortably. And Ultraspire is one of my sponsors, and they make a really nice pack that it's called the Zygos. And it has a really nice back zipper pocket and all this mesh where you can just really stuff a lot of different things in it, like a lot of layers. And you kind of need a bladder for a 200-mile race because it's just a really easy way to carry more water, or at least have that capacity. So yeah, it's nice to have a pack that can hold a bladder, but also have room for all of the layers and nutrition and the GPS devices, your lights, all of those different things that you need to carry a lot more of in a 200-miler.
That's an interesting bit of advice or fact that you said. I don't like hydration bladders. I hate sucking stuff up a tube and using that energy. I'd rather just take a water bottle and squirt it into my mouth. But you're saying for these long distances between aid stations, that's probably the most effective way to carry that much water?
Yeah, I think so. At least for the sections where there's like a lot of time in between aid stations. Otherwise, you'd be carrying, 5 or 6 bottles. It'd be easier to
No.
just to have a bladder with, a couple liters in there. So, uh, yeah, it really depends on your preference. But I personally think it's easier to, just carry the bladder.
And there's an overlap here between 200 milers and things like multi-stage races. So one of the things that got me into the sport in the first place was the Marathon des Sables, a 7-day stage race where you've got to carry all your food for the week. You've got to carry bedding, you've got to carry clothes, everything other than the water supply for each day and a tent that they provide at the end of the day. So that's an even heavier pack. But because it's so much heavier, you've got to practice with that. I think a lot of people can probably find that their small backpack they might use for training runs is fine for a 100-miler, especially a North American one where you don't have compulsory gear. In Europe, you've got to be carrying waterproof pants and some other stuff that adds a little bit of weight. But it's good to bear in mind that that is one of the big changes going from 100 to a 200. You've got to get used to carrying extra weight. And some of the things people might not realize are, first of all, how you access things like food. You don't have to take the pack off to get access to things, but also how things fit in the back, because you might have more pokey, solid things like a GPS device, a charging device for that, more lights. And again, like the the multi-stage where you're going to have these extra bigger things to do with bedding as well. Because if you want to be able to sleep at the side of the trail, you might want to have at least a little bit of extra weight for a sleeping bag or maybe a sleeping mat or something that could be very lightweight, not just what you're going to use at aid stations where maybe you can have a drop bag. So that extra weight means you've got to practice with it. I think a lot of people maybe underplay how important it is to have an idea of how these things fit in the backpack. So one of the things I always get people to practice is put all the stuff in there. First of all, make sure it fits. And then make sure it's not bouncing around in weird ways that chafe you in the wrong places. Make sure you don't have things like the heavy stuff going to the bottom and then that's solid and it rubs the bottom of your back because it just kind of moves around that way. But these are things that you only get through practice, and that it is a noticeable difference from 100 miling to 200 miling.
And you mentioned organization of your pack, knowing where everything is without digging for it and looking for it, especially, at night when there's not a lot of light out there, except the one you carry with you. And it takes energy to find things. It takes energy to wonder where it is. All that energy should be used for running and moving down the trail and making decisions. Things like, where is that squirrel's nut butter? And it's somewhere in my pack. When you need it, and you don't want to have to use energy to look for it.
So what do you do when you go into an aid station and either your crew or the aid station workers are helping you unload and load your vest? I mean, is that something you got to pay particular attention to make sure that they're putting stuff back in where you want it?
Well, I'll just lead with that and say, this goes for any distance race, just not 200s. You've got to take control of your own stuff. You give out the assignment, you hand them the bladder, you take it out because you put it back in, so it's secured, so you don't have to worry about it running down the back of your shorts, halfway up the next climb.
Right.
And so you take responsibility for that and give them an assignment. Hey, fill this with half ice, half water. I want the electrolyte, and then seal it up and you put it back in. So I think you manage your own pack. It's your pack. You manage it. Put them to work.
I think this whole discussion of training with that pack is good for me, because when Don and I go out on our Saturday run together, sometimes we see people with about 15 pounds worth of stuff in their packs. And I don't do this to their face, but I kind of laugh under my breath. And then Don and I laugh about it later that this person's going for a 5-mile run with 15 pounds worth of weight. Well, they may be training for a 200. So thank you for reminding me that I need to be a little kinder on the trail.
Scott, I remind you to be kinder all the time. Thank you.
I know.
Thank you, Annie and Ian, for helping me.
And a thing you can do with your crew to make sure that you're more efficient, because your brain's going to be a bit fuzzy when you're deep into a race, you can give them a checklist. And one of those things could be that they ask you, do you have the food you need to get to the next aid station? Do you still have the lighting? Do you have this and this and this? So that your fuzzy brain, you're not having to think, do I have everything? I can't remember what everything is. they could just very quickly go through that list. And that's the kind of thing where your logistical preparation is totally in your control, and you can make it easier for the crew, especially if that crew is family and friends who aren't 200-mile specialists. They don't know what it's like to go through it themselves. The easier it is and the fewer mistakes they can make, the more likely it is that things will go well for you.
One thing I'd put on that checklist, Ian, and I think that's a great idea. Do you have your aid station checklist, to not only use for your crew, but for you? Because I don't know how many times I've left with goo wrappers in my shorts, stuck in there countless times. And that a simple checklist would make sure I didn't miss any of those.
And also, they have the time to do that. You're just sitting around eating some food or whatever. They can go through this and just pummel you with some questions that your brain can manage that, but your brain may not be able to ask those questions in itself because you're too tired and you've got your sleep deprived and all these other things in the race.
Go ahead, Annie. Were you going to make some additional comment?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say it's helpful to, I like to make nutrition baggies and put all the gels and everything you need at each, for like the next section, and give that to your crew so that they have, all of the nutrition that you need for each aid station that they'll see you at. And that way, they're not trying to figure out, well, maybe they'll need like, this many gels for this next section. It's just all already planned out. And that might change if you're behind pace or ahead of pace, that kind of thing. But just to have like some sort of plan in place, so you're not like doing it on the fly.
This goes to an even bigger idea, which is just you have control over a lot of logistics in any race, choosing what you're going to carry, what you'll have in drop bags, what your crew are going to do. And the longer the race is, the more important that is. So it really helps if you're doing your first 200 miler to maybe crew and pace someone else before that, because you might have seen what it's like in 100, but you might want to see in person what it's like to be out at a 200 miler for things you might not have thought about, that then when you're doing it yourself, you've gained that experience.
That's a great suggestion, Ian. That's a really great suggestion. Now, this whole thing that we've talked about packs, we mentioned aid stations, and one of the other items we have on the list that Annie came up with was to plan and be efficient at the aid stations. And I kind of thought about that for a minute. I go, on a 200-mile run, I've been at those aid stations, and it seems like no one's real efficient in those aid stations. Or maybe not. Let me rephrase that. They're not quick. A lot of them sit down, take a break, doctor their feet, take care of issues, and so they're not as quick at a 200-mile aid station. Now, I haven't seen the winners of the 200-mile races like you have been a winner, Annie. How do they differ? How much quicker and how much more efficient do you plan your aid station visits in a 200 versus a 100?
Now, keep in mind, Scott, she's never seen us in the background. She has no idea what a slow aid station looks like. She's the Indianapolis 500 pit crew. We're back at the Costco, change your tire, go shopping, and wait for your car to come out.
Well, that's why I said have her compare how she does it on 100 versus 200. And then I'm going to throw the question to you, Don. How does your aid station look different from 100 to 200?
Perfect.
Yeah, I would say it's pretty drastic difference. Like in 100, I won't sit down at all if I can help it. And I'm just like moving through as quick as I can and like standing, shoving food down, or just like handing my empty bottles to my crew. They put them back in, or fresh ones in, and then give me my little baggie of gels for the next section, and off I go. So the only reason I would ever need to stop in 100 is like if I had a really bad blister problem or was just dealing with something, I'd stop and sit down. But I try not to sit down if I can help it in 100. Whereas in a 200, I'll sit down to eat while my crew is packing my pack and making sure I have enough batteries and gels and everything for the next section. And then, if I need to sleep or take care of a blister problem, I'll do that. But the time goes by really fast at the aid stations in a 200. Like it's just it'd be so easy for an hour to fly by. So I think it's really important to communicate with your crew, like how long you want to spend at these aids so that they can kind of help move you along. Because when you're in it, it just feels like, oh, I've only been here for a couple of minutes when you've really been there for half hour. So
that's a really good point. I initially I thought take as much time as you want at the 200 aid station. I mean, you have 4 days to complete the thing, right? So take your time. But I think you're absolutely right. If you go in with the idea that without an expectation or a plan on being efficient, you could spend twice as much time there as you really need. So if you go in there with a plan and say, I'm going to sit down, this is where I'm going to, reapply some lubricant. This is where I'm going to actually order a breakfast burrito, have them make it and eat it hot, nice, But as soon as I finish that burrito, I'm out of here. I'm not going to take a nap. I'm not going to. So I like that a lot, Annie.
And like you're saying, you don't want to waste time. So you need a bit more time to sort
Right.
some of these things out. But it's the same principle as in a shorter trail race, which is if you're not moving, then you could have been maybe walking out of there. You could have been eating
Right.
while you walk and cover a mile in the time that you were sat down. And the other thing that I like to remind people is when you sit down, you get stiff. And then those next few miles are that much harder. Of course, you're going to feel like that for a lot of a 200 miler versus a 100 miler. So there's only so much you can make that easier on yourself. But I'd always say try and get out of there as quickly as you can, making sure you get everything you need. So if it's a 100 miler, that might be potentially a minute in an aid station. In a 200 miler, it's going to be a bit longer. But do you need to sit down and do something, or could you do it standing up? If you're going to have a nap, obviously that's a different situation, but you want to get into the napping situation as soon as you can versus linger for half an hour and then chat to people and then lie down, and the time's going by slower. So there's not as much urgency. There's many days that you can take to finish these, but I'd argue it's easier to keep some of that momentum there, both physically and mentally, so that there's a kind of purpose behind what you're doing. So, well, I'm eating now, so that needs some time. I'm sleeping now, that needs some time. But if you're just lingering and chatting, could you maybe do that with a pacer, walking with them instead, and you're at least covering some ground?
Good point. How about you, Don?
Well, I can tell you just in a visual what my 200-mile aid station stops are like. And keep in mind that some of them are designated sleeping areas, and there are tents. So I look for those tents, and I eat some food, digest while I'm lying down and just taking it easy. So I don't really push through those 200-mile aid stations that are designated to sleeping without taking a little rest time. So I'm not pushing the clock to get through them. That's me, Annie. And so you'd never know that up front, but that's what happens. And that's what those tents are for. They're not for the aid station workers. They're actually for runners moving through.
Actually, just to ask a question about this, you've both done multiple 200 milers, so you can compare and contrast, including Annie's done, well, you've done both done stuff in Europe compared to America. But do you find that those designated sleeping areas are quiet enough, or is there often a bit too much talking, whether it's just someone coming in and they're talking to their crew, or hopefully not loud music from the aid station people, but what is it like? And is there quite a wide variety of what it's like with those? So, you go first on then and see what Annie thinks.
Sure. Well, here in the U.S., my experience has been you can sleep anywhere on the trail that you want and take a dirt nap in between. But my only experience in Europe was Tour de France, and they didn't allow for sleeping in between aid stations. They wanted you in the designated sleeping area to sleep. So that was, and then specifically to your point, when it's noisy, it's tough for me to sleep. You could put earplugs in, you could put some white noise in your ear, but just the hustle and bustle, you seem to stay a little bit more alert. I like the solitude of a dirt nap. That would be my preference.
Mm. Or a rental car with the heater on full bore.
Yeah, and
that's actually Don's preferred thing is when he arrives there, I start the car up, turn the heater on high, and let him go in there and shut the car up so that there's no noise.
And that smells great, isn't it, Scott, when you get in there and have to go to the next aid station?
Oh boy, that car, I think they should have fined us for how that car looked and smelled when we took it back to the rental car agency.
How about you, Annie?
I would say, yeah, in the American 200 milers, I like to sleep in the car with the heat on full blast, and yeah.
You do too, huh?
Yeah. But I have used the cots at the aid stations once at Moab, and it just happened to be like I was really tired and it was pretty quiet at that aid station, so that was a good experience. And then in the European 200 that I did, I think it's really similar to Tour de France, the Swiss Peaks 360, and they had really nice cots and places for you to sleep at all of those aid stations, and like showers and massage therapists. It was pretty nice.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, and there were some where you could have like your own individual room to sleep in. And then there was one in particular that it was just one little tiny room with all these cots. And you walk in the room and it just reeked so bad. Like, I just remember like trying to fall asleep and I was like, I feel like I can barely breathe. The stench was so bad.
Well, it sounds like the car is the really good tip here. That you, both of you said that you find that's the most useful. So that's generally going to be possible when you have your crew there, and probably a reason for them to have a larger car or something like an RV that has a proper bed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say, Annie, your sleep stations were probably quieter because you were up front. There weren't as many people going through the aid station as the latter people.
Ryan has a comment for us, Scott.
Oh.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, is that better? Okay.
Good job. All right, let's move on. This is one that I think Annie had on her list and Don had on his list, and they had it kind of mentioned differently. But let's talk about the mental side of being in it or being in a race that's taking multiple days, where you see multiple sunsets, multiple sunrises. How do you prepare mentally for something like that, Annie?
Yeah, I feel like you really need to be in the right headspace because it's just easy to get overwhelmed with how far you have to go. So you just really have to live in the present moment, as cliche as that sounds, and not get too ahead of yourself. Like I just remember thinking on the first night of Swiss Peaks when the sun was going down, I was like, oh my gosh! And after this, I have 3 more nights. Like I'm gonna do this.
Wow.
So yeah, and I just reminded myself, okay, we're just gonna get through this night, and then get through to the day tomorrow, and then just kind of one day, one night at a time, and then it all just kind of blurs together into this huge adventure. But I don't think of it as, oh, I'm gonna go out and run 230 miles. I think of it as, okay, I'm just running the 10 miles to the next aid station, and break it into those really small goals and have goals for each day and night. That kind of helps.
Oh,
what kind of goals do you have
that
for a single day?
Oh, just trying to get to certain aid stations by a certain time, or try to get to a certain aid station before the sun goes down. Those kinds of goals can be really helpful.
What about you, Don?
Well, I parallel that quite a bit. I used my real timepiece was the sun. Instead of running, I'm going to run to the next tree. Well, I've got to run from one aid station to the next, and breaking the race down and compartmentalizing it that way. I thought more of, I'm going to run with the sun. I'm going to run until sunset, and then my next run is to sunrise, and then my next run is to sunset. And I just broke it up into days and the way the sun moved. And it was too much work to search for the next tree to run to, or think how far to the next aid station, and is my watch really accurate right now? It's just, hey, I'm out here. I'm in it completely. I'm all in. I've got to make it to the night. No doubt I'm not going to be finished with the race by night. So I need to reduce my load, my workload, my pace, make sure everything else is right on my checklist that I need to do, because I'm in it till the night, and then we'll take on the night next.
And this is how you deal with the process of just, how do I keep moving? Because it's too enormous to think, oh, I've got 200 miles left. I've got 180 miles left. But it's also like that in a 100K. Oh, I've got 50 miles left. The numbers are so huge. It's always good to be able to break it down to smaller parts. So my default, as a starting point at least, is aid station to aid station. The aid stations are very far apart in 200 milers typically, so that can be maybe a bit too big. But another thing you can do, especially if you're having a bad patch, is say, I'll get to the top of that little climb. I'll get around that corner. I'm allowed to eat something once I get to where that runner is currently. And you can just give yourself these tiny things, and you can be very much in the moment of what do I have to do right now? And just forget the fact you've got to be out there for so much more, because that can just be a little bit intimidating, particularly if you're having a bad patch. So instead, you want to be able to just say, okay, well, what does it take to keep moving one more step, one more step? And you sometimes have to break that down into very small pieces. But I'd say that's the same really in any ultra. It's just you're going to have to do it for many, many more hours in a 200 miler.
Are either of you or looking at your GPS watch during a 200 versus a 100? Are you? I mean, Annie, I assume you are, since you're trying to get on a podium. But are you looking at that and looking at the time of day or the running time and saying, okay, I've been on my feet for 24 hours. I need to get to the next aid station? Or are you looking at it not in time, but maybe more in miles? How often do you look at your watch is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I have time goals throughout the whole race. So, yeah, I'm looking at that to see if I'm on track to, make it to the aid station by a certain time, and just doing a lot of math. Like, I feel like I'm constantly doing math in those races, trying to figure out, okay, how far is it to the next one? And I'm going this pace. Okay, like how long will it take me to get there? And will that fall on my time goal? So I feel like I'm constantly making those calculations. But sometimes I forget about it and don't look at it for a while. It just kind of depends what mood I'm in. But it was interesting, like for the European 200 milers, I would focus a lot more on the elevation gain. And I knew like what elevation I was going to hit by a certain at the top of a certain climb. So it's like, okay, once I have that much climbing done, I'll be close to the aid station. So I'd be looking to see if I got to that amount of elevation gain instead of mileage, because the miles were so, it was pretty disappointing to like see that you've only gotten a couple miles and you've been working so hard on this climb for like an hour and a half.
No, I'm glad you said that, Annie, because I always find that on a hillier race of any distance, it's the vert that I'm measuring. So I know how big all the climbs and descents are at Western States in my mind from doing it enough times. And it's just, okay, well, it's a 3-mile climb. It's a 1,500-foot climb. So I can look at my GPS and go, okay, I've done 1,100 feet. So there's 400 feet more. I don't care how many miles it is. It's how much more climbing is it, how much more descending. You've got to have some course knowledge for that. But in a race like, well, any race, to be honest, you can have a course profile, you can have a course map that'll give you that idea. But I often find that the amount of climbing and descending is more meaningful than just the mileage to the next thing.
What a great suggestion for really any race. Do they still make, I think there was a company at one point that would make temporary tattoos that had the elevation profile that you could tattoo on your forearm. Do they still make those?
I'm not sure, but I've seen them at a lot of different races, but not for a while. So I hope they do, because it's a great idea.
Yeah, it really is. Don, what about you? How often do you look at your watch, or are you using a sundial?
Well, I do use a sundial. That's my big picture piece. But I use that GPS absolutely, but I reset it at every aid station because I couldn't trust how it got contaminated or you got noisy before. Was it still on? So if I knew the next run was 14 miles, and there was, to Ian's point, and there was 2,000 feet of elevation gain. Those are the two numbers I watched. Okay, so I know I had 13 miles, so I said, okay, I'm about halfway through, and I've done about a third of the climb. Okay, so we've got some big climb left. I just took care of that. When I was getting close to elevation, I knew it was going to be a cruise to the end. So I just played those types of games and balanced those. But I needed to reset my watch each time and then make sure I had that data for the next section. And so when you restart your watch, I looked at it often, and it says, you have 36 hours left to rehabilitate yourself before this next run. Like, wait a minute, I have to go now. I don't have 36 hours. So that's what happened to me on the resetting. But yes, knowing your elevation, knowing your time, and if you can fill your head with that much stuff, I know that 13-mile section has two big climbs, one halfway and one 3/4. I know that. And so just watching that really gave me hope and allowed me to kind of move along with certainty of where I was on that section.
To follow up for this same topic of how to mentally prepare for the races, you're going to have lots of downtime, lots of lower points mentally. You're going to have more difficulties. They're going to happen for longer periods likely, and you're going to have a lot more miles left to get out of the race once you get through any of them. So how do both of you prepare for that in, say, a 200 miler where you're having a low point, you've got 3 days left, versus a 100 miler where you've got 30 miles left, where it's at least a little bit more digestible? So do you do anything different in training, or how do you, what are some tools you have for that? So Annie first.
I think like in the race, I just, remind myself I'm going through a big low like that. And I just think to myself, like, how on earth am I going to make it another 100 miles or whatever it is? And I just remind myself that I'll probably come out of that low after I stop at the next aid station and kind of take care of myself. And then another thing I like to do is right away when I start feeling that way, like I'll eat a gel. And half the time it actually helps a lot. So sometimes you're just spiraling mentally because you're, low on sugar or you're sleepy or something. So if you just take some caffeine or a gel, a lot of times that can kind of pull you out of that downward mental spiral.
Yeah.
Change it up. I like that. Change it up. If you're feeling low, change something. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then just having the confidence to know that, I've been through this so many times. Of course, this too shall pass. And that's one of those things that whatever distance you're running, it's going to get better. So what do I need to do adjust in what I'm doing to make it better? Is it pace? Is it, another piece of clothing removed or put on? What is it that was going to help me get back to the good place? And I'll tell you a story about this climb that we did. I think it was a 200 mile race. And there was a guy off the side of the trail, and he was just giving up. He was done, and he was laying there. And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just done." I go, "Yeah, I know how that feels." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you this: just go to sleep. Go to sleep right now. Because if you cut your band now and you pull out, then you're done. Just sleep as long as it takes. There's a lot of time left in this race. If you slept 5 hours, you're still in the race, and you're probably going to feel pretty decent after the 5 hours. So don't quit now. Just do something to kind of kick the can down the road. And I imagine when you get to that can, you're going to feel pretty good."
So a lot of what you're saying there is kind of trust the process of you can come out the other side. This isn't always going to get worse from this point. When I did the Grand Slam with the 400 milers really close together in the summer about a decade ago, it was the same kind of mentality, because it wasn't just, I've got to get through 100 milers. I've got to get through this, and there's 2 more after that, or there's 3 more after that. And so what I kind of did in advance to prepare myself for that was say, this is going to be harder than stuff you've done before. And there's going to be points where you might be okay if you only had to do 10 more miles, but you're going to have to do it again in a couple of weeks. And so just kind of knowing that it was coming up, I was able to reset my expectations that it's okay to have these low points. They're a normal part of it. And in fact, they're an unavoidable part of it. And so when they happen, to try and look on the positives from that. And this is a tactic I like to use for all the people I coach for any race. But there's always going to be a more positive spin that you can put on stuff. So a good example would be you're vomiting. It seems objectively negative. But in that moment, it could be a chance to say, you know what, this is going to be some great stories afterwards. This is going to be a chance to see how well I cope with this for the next race, which is even harder, or for that next section where it's going to be in the day and it's going to be hotter. And so my stomach will be even more tested there. So you can think of it as a challenge and embrace it rather than as a negative, horrible thing that you just want to get out of. And that really helps to keep that more positive mindset. But part of that is preparing yourself for it in advance. Build up races over the years, literally, to 200 miles is part of it. But even just at the start line saying, there's going to be a lot of crap that happens here. And I'm up for it. I know it's possible, but it's going to happen, and that's okay.
And go ahead, Annie.
Oh, sorry. I just had another thing to add to that. As far as the mentality going into the race, a couple of different like mantras I like to use for these races is, you can eat an elephant one bite at a time. So I'm constantly reminding myself that, kind of going back to breaking it up into smaller goals. And then another one is, burning the boats, like going into the race. If you've heard that, I think it was like Alexander the Great went into this battle and he told all the soldiers to burn the boats. And they were like, well, if we don't win the battle, do you think we should keep them in case we need to like go escape? And he's like, no, because if we burn them, we have no choice but to win the battle. So I like to think of that like, okay, I just don't want to have any, second thoughts like, oh, I could, drop out, or, just kind of going into like, I'm all in and um, yeah, not going to go back on what I set out to do.
I like that, Annie. All in, 100% committed. Here I go. I'm off on this. I'm not backing out. I'm not gonna bail out of this race halfway between because there happens to be an aid station close to an exit road. I'm in all the way. And to your point earlier, Ian, you were talking about, things are going to happen to me along the way. It's inevitable. It's just part of the process and part of why we do it, to find ourselves in a jam and to work our way out of it and to have a story to tell after we're through it. That's us, all the stories people want to hear anyway. They don't want to hear how you were running fast and felt like you were on a cloud. They want to hear about how you struggled and how you pulled yourself out and persevered. I mean, those are the great stories. And so identifying these small things coming up early. I know it was one of our other points on the last podcast, but feeling something going sideways and correcting it before it's way off course. The earlier you catch it, the more successful you'll be of not pulling yourself out of a hole, because that's costly too. The deeper you get into the hole, you've got to use energy to get out of the hole. Mental energy, physical energy, emotional, all the stuff. But if you can stay on the path and recognize something moving off to the side and getting yourself back on, that's a veteran move right there. That's when you've arrived, is when you can read the room.
And the way that Annie described it there was kind of an all-in commitment. The way that I thought about it when I had, because the Grand Slam was definitely harder than doing a single 100-miler, I just gave myself the certainty that I was going to finish. There was no doubt. It wasn't, oh, well, we'll see how it goes, or if I have a bad one, maybe it's, not going to be. It was, no, that I will finish. So I'm starting off from the point of view of, no matter what happens, I will get to the end, because I knew it was going to be harder. And then that means that whenever you do have something go a little bit wrong, you say, well, I've got to finish it anyway, so I better fix this now. So it actually helps you to be quicker at realizing when things aren't quite to plan, or you're having something starting to go and get a little bit more difficult, because you're not thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll just push through it and I'll see how fast I'm going. Maybe I'll be good later. Instead, you say, no, I have to fix this because I'm definitely finishing. And so if I don't fix it, that doesn't fit in with the mindset that I already have, that I'm committed to this. So it's just a different way of putting it, but I think it's always helpful to explain the same thing in more than one way, because some ways it'll resonate with one person, some ways it'll resonate with another person.
Good point.
That's great.
One of the, I'm going to say this and then we'll get on to the next one, because I have to say it because it was helpful for me and maybe it could be helpful for someone else. When I was running Western States, I knew that I think Don may have coined the phrase, the bus is going to hit you, right? At some point, the bus is going to hit you. And when I started the race, I knew the bus was going to hit me. And every mile I thought about that, not in a negative way, but I was anticipating it and actually had a little bit of an excitement for it. So that when it did hit, it was actually a good thing. It wasn't the negative, oh, you're in this bad spot. It was actually a good thing. And I remember when we had Courtney DeWalter on years ago, we were talking about the pain cave and how she's tricked her mind or has changed the paradigm of that pain cave, where she welcomes it and actually enjoys the pain cave and going in there and making a livable space for herself in that pain cave. I think that's a good way to mentally prepare yourself.
Well, it's exactly what we were saying a minute ago. It's the idea that you're spinning it more positively. It's a difficult thing, but that's a challenge. That is what you're here for, versus it's a negative because you don't like it. I mean, it's literally my little tagline here, embrace the suck. Yeah. It's exactly that mentality.
Let's move to one that I thought was really strange, but both of you guys had it on your list. And that's personal hygiene. Let's talk about that for a minute. I know that, on some long runs, it's nice to have a little toothbrush that you can brush your teeth and get a good fresh mouth there going. But what are you talking about, Annie, about personal hygiene? What kind of hygiene kit do you have on a long race, like a 200+ race?
Yeah, I think I like to feel sort of at least a little bit human when I'm out there. So I just think it can be really refreshing to just brush your teeth and wash your face, that kind of thing. And I noticed, because in Moab, I was like, I'm just going to go for it. I don't want to stop and, take too much time to brush my teeth. And I got these like sores in my mouth from like all the sugar in the gels. And then it was really hard to eat after that, anything sweet after that happened. Because it just stung and like burned so bad. It's really gross. So yeah, now I brush my teeth and it just helps you feel like more fresh and yeah.
To Don's point, I mean, you're every morning you get up, right? You got to keep your same habits. You get up and you brush your teeth, right, Don? What about you? Don, what's in your hygiene kit?
Oh, I had a fresh kit,
hair gel.
Oh, yeah, the whole piece, a blow dryer at some aid stations where we could do that. But, a change of socks, a shoes, a short shirt, just a complete change like that, a toothbrush. And all of a sudden you're a new person, a different person. You're not the same one slogging down, dragging your body through this trail to the next. You actually feel like you've had a rest, a sleep, you're new, you're energized, and you feel like, hey, this kind of is like mile one, kind of. It's a convenient way to trick yourself into going further and still feeling good. Ian?
Would you wash anything? So let's say you're changing your shoes and socks. Would you at least get like a wet cloth on it and just try and clean the bit and then put this new stuff on? Or you just brand new socks and that's all you do?
Oh, no. It's a good time to clean up and get wash up with that cloth that you're talking about so you really feel fresh. It's a new day.
Yeah, I bring a cloth in, or like these really nice wipes, like body wipes, so you can just wipe off with that. Deodorant, and then at some of the aid stations in Europe, like they'll have full-on showers. You can go take a shower in the middle of the race. Yeah. So
did you use them?
Tour de France too. They had showers and a massage, and I didn't have any money with me because I'm just going down the trail. And I'm an American. We don't carry the money with us, and so I think they advised us to have a card or something just in case we wandered off into a different country. But they did have showers and a masseuse, and I took advantage of it.
Yeah, me too. I didn't use the shower, but I got the massage, which is really helpful.
I did that for my masseuse. I figured I owe the shower to the person working on me.
And surely sunscreen as well, given that each day stuff will have worn off and you clean your face. And it's a lot of running in summer. Almost all these races are in the hotter weather.
Yeah, for sure.
What's a reward that you give yourself? Do you pack a reward like a reward for me would be like a Reese's peanut butter cup or some Reese's Pieces. The Reese's Pieces are a little bit better because they don't melt. But do you have rewards that you give yourself? It could be music. It could be something edible. It could be a note from a family member. Do you use any kind of those strategies, Annie?
I used music for the first time ever in a race at the Swiss Peaks 360, and I just used it for like a 24-hour period. But I found it to be super helpful, and I only listened to 2 songs. And I wasn't really listening.
Over and over? Yeah. The same 2 songs? Oh my gosh.
My brain just couldn't handle, I just didn't want to have to think about it or think about a new song. So those were the only 2 that didn't really irritate me. So I just kept them on repeat.
Okay, you got to let us know, what are the 2 songs, Annie?
One is called, it's 1035 by Tiesto, I think. And then
really upbeat.
Yeah, really upbeat. And then the other one was Pumping Blood, and it was like a remix of some kind by like Nano. Yeah, I can't remember the artist. But...
Ryan, can we close this show with one of those songs? Ryan can make that happen.
Annie, okay. I'm calling BS on you, Annie. You don't know what the song is, and you listen to both of them over and over and over and over for 24 hours? And you don't know the name of the band?
I know.
Come on.
Well, I just saw the little title and I was paying attention.
Oh, I'm joking.
It sounds like a kind of techno Euro dance party as you're going along the trails.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Don, what about you? What kind of rewards do you give yourself?
No, I was just out there for the punishment, Scott. No rewards, just pure, just make it happen. Ian?
When I last won Rocky Raccoon, I was having a pretty nasty patch, maybe like 2/3 of the way through. And I told myself, I was already planning on buying a new car soon. And I said, if you win the race, you're allowed to buy the new car as soon as you get home. That was really motivating. It's like, just for a few more hours, I get the car. I was going to get the car anyway, but it was good motivation in the moment.
Now that's a reward. Boy, that I never even thought about giving myself a car.
And that's the thing. It didn't have to be real as such. It just has to be something in the moment you can say, that's the reason I'm going to do it. And so sometimes that could be, you don't have to do this race again if you finish it. But if you DNF it, you do have to come back. And you go, I don't like this. I don't want to come back. So I'll finish it.
That's a good
and then
one.
you finish it and you go, actually, I do like it. I will come back anyway.
Either way, you go back.
Yeah.
Annie, I like your music thing. I think it was one of our friends, Lee McKinley, that gave me the tip that you don't listen to music for like the first 30 miles of 100. So, you're with yourself, you're checking in, you're doing that diagnostic on your feet, your legs, your cardio, all that sort of stuff. And it kind of gives you something to look forward to at mile 30. Now I can listen to one of my playlists, or in your case, 2 songs. Ian?
Well, it makes me think, is this another change from maybe 100 miling to 200 miling? I personally don't listen to music or listen to podcasts or anything when I'm doing a race. But if that's a day-long race, that's a bit easier to commit to. And one of the reasons is I want to hear if someone behind me is shouting, you're going the wrong way. And so that's always on my mind. But in a 200-miler, you're going to have a GPX file on your watch, and you're following a line, and you can know if you're going to be off that course anyway. Plus, you've got a lot more hours to fill. So do you guys find that you're more inclined to music or listening to stuff in a 200 versus a 100, or are they just the same for both of you? So again, Annie first.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've never tried it in any other race. So, yeah, I just don't think I could, because even when I have pacers, I don't really like to talk. I'm not like super chatty. So I kind of just like to almost have nothing going on in my brain and just focus. But yeah, I think I might use it in the future, because it was like night 3. I was really tired, and I was like, I had my headphones with me, and I was like, maybe I should just try some music. And it was like a really steep climb, like one of the hardest climbs of the whole race. And like, it just helped me so much, like get off that. So yeah, I think I would definitely use it again.
One of the things that just came to my mind, Ian, and you brought up the subject that popped this thought into my mind. In a 200 miler, do you need to have navigation skills? In a 100 miler, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, they're fairly well marked. Probably a little more difficult to get lost. That may be different in Europe. But on a 200 miler, there's fewer markings. And you probably need to rely on, most of the races require you to have some kind of a beacon for the race directors to keep track of you. But like you said, having a GPX file on your watch, or whether you're carrying a handheld, do you need to have the ability to navigate or use those devices so that you know how to navigate?
I'll answer part of that, Scott, because I've run the races, but I've also marked Tahoe 200, a 60-mile section through there. And our instructions from the race director, Candace, was anytime that there is a change in direction of the course, that's where you put it. And put your marker. And as you're looking at the trail, you needs to be in the spot where runners look. If somebody's looking up, they need to see it. And if they're a looking down runner, you need to put it somewhere down so they don't miss it. And think about lighting as they're coming at, things of that nature, really putting a lot of thought into keeping people safe on the trail. Occasional confidence ribbons. Occasionally when there's no turn here, but it's kind of nice to see that there's a ribbon and you're on course. So it's really not a compass map race as much as they're there where you need it, and occasionally a confidence ribbon. So in the races that I've done, and I've done those 3 of Candace's and then one in Europe, they were all marked well, and that was never. And my sense of direction, poor, the worst. I get lost. On our home course. So it's I think they were marked very well.
So you're saying you don't need to have GPX or navigation skills.
It's smart to have
just know where to find.
It's smart to have it on your watch,
find the ribbons,
so you can know if you're on. It's another confidence. I've got this. I don't need to be able to see, because at any time I can check and see if I'm on course. but it's not necessary to get it done.
What about you, Annie? Can you read the sun and the stars? And do you have navigation skills?
Yeah, I really like the Gaia app, and I always download the course onto that map, so I can pull it out, and then also having it on your watch is nice. And then, yeah, but I found, they mark the courses really well, except for when they get tampered. Like there was one year where some cows ate the markings at Moab.
Oh.
So people kind of got turned around during that section, or maybe it was Cocodona. So yeah, you do have to have the ability to, pull out your map and figure out how to get back on course if you do get off. But I don't think you need like map and compass skills type thing.
So you actually are using your mobile phone with the Gaia app as your primary device instead of your watch, but you have it on your watch also.
Yes, yeah. I just like to see the big
know.
picture, and yeah, it's just a nice way to kind of check your progress. So.
Which brings up the point that you probably need to have a way to recharge that phone, because I don't know any phone that will last for 4 days. So, Ian, you had a comment?
I was going to say, in comparing kind of European races and American races, the continental European ones tend to be incredibly well marked. And particularly things like sky running, where it's not necessarily on a trail. They have little flags, 20 feet apart. There's no way you're going to get lost at all. And so typically I found that I've never had any issues getting lost on European race. Some US ones, not quite as good, including I think 3 of the times at Western States, I have managed to get a little bit lost. At Leadville, I've done it once. Generally, I think it's just because they're a bit more spaced out. It's more confidence markers, but maybe not enough of them, or there's a turn, but it's not made quite obvious enough. The thing I love that not all races do in the US is when they have a X saying wrong way. I wish they did that. Anytime there's a turn, here's the flags for the right way and an X for the wrong way. But again, US races, European continental ones, you do not need skills like that. Some of the UK ones you do. Not all, but I remember doing ultras and things like fell races where there are no markings whatsoever. So sometimes it would be like a map, but it's just a list of turns. It's things like get to the bridge at mile marker 24, and then you cross it. And so you're really having to read them, and it's not like reading a normal map where you're just following along with map reading skills. It's kind of more annoying than that in some ways. But it just depends. But yeah, European ones, generally, that's not an issue. And US ones, certainly, other than the Barclay, where, of course, you need a lot of map reading skills.
and when you're running up front, like Annie and Ian, and you're one of the first 3 going on the course, you're a bit more vulnerable. When you're in the mid-pack stuff, you've got footsteps of 100 people that have been tromping through the trail before you, and so you can kind of see where you need to be.
In fact, just to add one thing there, in the UK, it is typical that they'll call it recceing to go and reconnaissance a course. So they'll recce a course in advance, which is kind of essential if you're not going to have markings, because you've got to have familiarity of, this is a difficult area. I know that it's difficult going through this rock field or whatever it may be. But in general, I'd say that's not necessary for most races. But if it's one that says it's not marked or very minimally marked, that course knowledge is invaluable, as well as the map reading skills.
That's good. One of the things that Don had on his list that I'd like to talk about for a minute is stay healthy during training. What did you mean by that, Don?
Well, it never does you any favors to show up with a nagging injury. And those few extra miles that you want to stuff in that week could be better served in healing that week. That you're not going to get any better fitness just because of those extra miles you're trying to push out. In fact, your performance is probably going to suffer because you're not 100%. So, training for a race needs to be managed the same way that you run the race. If you need to back off pace, if you need to back off, whatever that you're doing, or add to whatever you're doing to make it a successful outcome on race day, you need to do the same thing during, preparation for the race. Ian?
Yeah, I mean, a good way of putting it, I think, is that the longer a race is, the minimum threshold of fitness goes up. You can't get through a 200 miler on 10 miles a week. Well, maybe you can get through a short distance race like that. But a smaller proportion of your success will be your fitness. so that the bare minimum goes up a bit. But the more important stuff is going to be, can you manage yourself well? Can you eat well? Can you sleep well in a 200 miler? Are you not chafing? Are you able to mentally keep it together? So the longer it is, the bigger proportion comes to that. And I think this is one of the reasons why you see closer races between men and women, because it's not just about the physical differences. It's all these other tactical things that mean that it isn't just, well, okay, the man is X% faster, and that's all that matters. While on kind of 100 miles and below, that's fairly predictable as being the main determinant.
Annie, as the specialized 200+ mile coach at Sharman Ultras, how do you coach someone that is going to a 200-mile race? Meaning, does their training plan have more intentional hiking, fast hiking, and less running? Is it more, longer distances during the week, or is it the same as a 100 or a 50 mile? Tell us a little bit about how the training plan that you write up for one of your 200-mile athletes.
Yeah, I think hiking and walking is a really underrated way to train for these 200s. And I think a lot of people get caught up in just running too much, and then they don't train because it's a different muscle group that you use for, walking versus running. So if you're just, putting in these long runs, but not training the hiking, walking muscles, you might, fatigue faster during the race. So, I have my athletes do a lot of walking with their pack, long walks, and then some, if they don't live in a hilly place or have access to like steep trails, I'll have them do some power hiking on the treadmill, which I know is really boring, but it is important, I think, to train those power hiking muscles with the pack. And I'll have them do different efforts to kind of break it up. So power hike at a hard effort and then go back down to like an easier effort, just so they can build some fitness that way. And then, it also depends on their schedule and how much time they have. Like a lot of them are just really limited on time. So we have to kind of make the most of a couple days a week where they're putting in, their 5-6 hour days. And then the rest of the week is just a bit lighter, but more intentional with, some harder efforts mixed in there and in less time. So.
And a question for both of you again is, because I think it's useful for people to compare, is, Annie, what percentage of a 200-mile race would you say you are hiking versus running? And then Don's answer as well.
Oh, yeah. I think, maybe like 70% hiking. But it also depends on the course. So,
if you don't train for hiking, you only train for running.
Yeah.
That's a big chunk of the race you haven't really trained very specifically for.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I was surprised to hear your answer, Annie, because I figured up front you were motoring the whole time, and the number that I thought of before you answered was 20% running. A good efficient shuffle. Not an official track run of 400 meters, but more of a just moving along efficiently. 20%. The rest is efficiently traveling somehow. Whether it's a hike, whether it's a good walk. And we've all had a running companion of ours pull over and have a bio break, and you just keep walking, and you've tried to catch that partner, and you think, man, did that guy run here? Because that's a pretty efficient way to move forward on a trail, just walking. There's a lot of distance that you can put on the course. Like Ian said, grab your burrito and walk down the trail and talk to your person that you want to talk to, because by the end of that burrito, you're going to be down the road a ways, and that's valuable.
And I think those numbers would probably surprise a lot of people who have maybe done 100 and they're going to do a 200 to realize just how much more hiking there'll be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a good point.
And it's funny.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Annie.
Oh, I was just going to say, sometimes it's kind of funny because like you'll get into a shuffle and feel like you're going so fast in a 200. It's like, man, I am really moving. Like, I'm just, like any shuffle, like it's just feels so fast. But in reality, like you're barely moving.
Then you get passed by
this
somebody.
This is what Kipchoge feels like.
We've all had that near the end of a race. We think we're really going fast, and then you look at your watch and go, "Oh, that's not as quick as I thought it was."
Yeah, I make this statement for the two coaches to weigh in on here, that I think that anybody, and this is an opinion, but you guys can go against it or support it. Doesn't matter. That's what makes a good conversation. That the 200-mile distance is really a management race. It's about managing what you're doing and what you have and how you distribute your effort and your motivation. So the 200 race is about management. That everybody that is at the start line and fit for their 100, whether it's first place or, last one coming in. If you're fit for 100, you can run the 200 as long as you manage your fitness properly. So I make that statement and throw it to the coaches and see what they think.
Go on, Annie.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, for sure. I think it's just a different mentality, but like as far as fitness goes, like if you can do 100, you can definitely do a 200. And I've even had an athlete who had never even done a 100-miler before and finished Moab 240. So
wow,
it's his first 200. Yeah. So, and Cocodona that next year. So did 200 plus milers in less than a year, having never run 100 before. So yeah, it is possible to do it.
Another way of thinking about this, as you say, it's the tactics that matter more than just the fitness, but it's the durability. So we had a podcast last year where we talked about this, and it's how quickly you wear yourself down, how quickly your muscles get sore. So one of the ways you reduce that is more hiking versus running. You don't have as much pounding. It's easier on the body. You're able to eat more food as well. Your heart rate is lower. But so much of it is being able to save yourself. So you've still got something left so that when you are 190 miles in, you can still run the flats a little bit. You can still hike fast. And again, another thing that I've said multiple times, I think, on the show is the idea of it's about how quick your slowest mile is, not how quick your fastest mile is. So much of that is just looking after yourself so that even in your bad patches, you can still move well, or you don't have to stay at an aid station for 5 hours vomiting because it's got too out of hand. But if you can improve that, how good you feel and how quickly you can move later on, you can move the needle a lot more there than you can for just running a minute a mile quicker through the first day.
Boy, Scott, you talk about gold nuggets and you refer to that right there is the number one thing said on this show today, I think, of taking care of yourself to make sure that you're not digging yourself out and costing yourself a great deal of what you have inside to finish this race, to pull yourself out of that hole. Take care of yourself as you're going through and avoid that, run around that hole and just keep on moving efficiently. That was a great comment, Ian.
Well, hey, this has been a fun couple episodes to learn about 200s. Annie, what's on your calendar for this year? Do you have a 200 that you're looking at, or are you going back to the 100s or even shorter distances?
I do, yeah. This is my first year back after having a pretty major injury. So I hadn't raced in a year and a half, and I just did the Black Canyon 100K. And then the rest of my season kind of like stacks up on each other. So I started with the 100K, and then I'm doing Canyons 100-miler in California in April. And then I'm doing Tahoe 200 in June, and then Tour de Gens in September. So
wow,
I'm excited.
Excellent. How's your Italian?
Not very good. Needs improvement.
Hey, Annie, I got to ask you, how did it feel coming back to the 100K after a year and a half off? Did you feel healthier and stronger than ever? Did you say, wow, I've got to get myself back to this grind of being able to do these long runs? What would you experience? I'm curious.
Yeah, I felt really strong and steady the whole day. Like I really didn't have any major highs or lows. And that was kind of the first race where I felt like I could be at a decent fitness level going into it. But I kind of knew, I had only been running for, I think about like a few months before that race, and was hiking a lot, building a base that way over the fall. But really only had like 3 months to train properly for it. So I kind of knew it was going to be like my best day ever, but just to get, a result on the board and just something to kind of like build off for the rest of the season was kind of my goal. And I felt like I did that. So I'm excited to continue to kind of build off of that the rest of this year.
Good. To your number of coaches that you have, Ian, there's people that have gone through a number of different experiences just like that. Somebody that had been off for a year and a half, that's a perfect match for somebody else that's been off for a period of time. So
well, there's so many different situations people can be in. That's why we try to make sure we can cater to pretty much all of that within the ultra world.
Let's talk about, what does the process look like if somebody is thinking of hiring a coach and they go to sharmanultra.com. What's the process? What does that look like?
So the initial stuff comes through to me, and they'll give me a bit of background about what they're looking for, what they're training for, the kind of situations, maybe the difficulties they've had in the past. In some cases, it might be, hey, I've got into Moab 240 and now I need a coach for that, and it's my first 200 miler. And then I try and work out which coaches potentially could fit them. Sometimes they'll already say, this is who I'd like to work with. And then there's a little bit of back and forth to work out what they'd want to do. And then if they want to know more about that coach, there's the potential for them to have a little chat with them. But we find it's actually more useful for them to listen to stuff like this, because here you could hear 2 episodes in a row with Annie telling you all her wisdom about 200 milers. That's probably a better idea of what it's like to work with Annie, what her personality is like, than just chatting to her for a few minutes. So we find that these podcasts are actually a great way for people to learn more about the coaches too. And then they start coaching. That first call goes over all the philosophies and gets the ball rolling.
So that initial qualification or interview, that's done with you, virtual face-to-face?
Where they're letting me know what they're looking for.
Okay.
And then I'll say, these are maybe the coaches you'd want to consider if they haven't already picked someone. And then I usually tell them it's good to listen to a podcast they've done, because it's just so much more in-depth. There's all these different questions. You're getting to really hear what that coach's style is like. And then you can tell from that whether they're going to click for you personally.
Great. That's interesting. Well, hey, Annie, thank you. Oh, I forgot to ask you, Ian. I messed up on the first part 1 of this and said that you were out there running marathons. That was old hat. That was last year.
That was the last 2
years. Now
years.
you're back on the trails.
Yeah, I've been doing road stuff for 2 years.
It's been 2 years?
I did a little bit of ultra running. Like I did a 100K last year just so I get a Western States qualifier, but I did not train for it. But no, I was doing road stuff, trying to get a marathon PR for a while. This year, I'm going back to hundreds. So I'm going to do the South Downs Way 100 miler, which is part of the Trans Gran Canaria World Series. Can't remember what the name of that is exactly. And that's in the UK. And then I'm going to do the Oregon Cascades 100 in August, 2 months later. So I'm limiting myself to just 200 milers this year. My norm was 3 to 4, but I thought I'll just try and enjoy it a little bit, not have too much travel, not have too much exhaustion from it. And I'm really excited to get back into it now.
How old's your car right now? Do you need a new car?
I have already replaced that one. That was 2016.
Okay. I was say that would for me, if I was coaching you, Ian, I would say it's time for a new car. Let's put something out there.
It might have to be a smaller
out
thing,
there.
like you can have that fancy meal or but you can find things to bribe yourself with. It doesn't have to be as expensive as a car.
Absolutely.
My typical my bribe is I can stop running if I make it to the finish line. That's my bribe.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I'm done. This is my last race ever.
Oh, I thought you meant stop running for that day. You mean ever.
That's what I meant. But Scott assumed that was forever, but I meant for that day.
I've heard him say that. I have recordings of him saying, I'm done. I'm never going to run again. And then 2 days later, he signed up for another.
Do you know what I said after my first 100 miler? So when I finished Western States and I had top 10, so I had an entry for next year. And I was driving home and I said, at the finish line, I said to my wife, never doing a 100 miler again. That was horrible. That's not my thing. About 2 hours later in the car, I said, you know what? I've got the entry already. I know what I can improve for next year.
It sucks us in, doesn't it? It
definitely.
sucks us in. There's something about it. Hey, thanks for sharing your wisdom, you two coaches. Sharmanultra.com is where you need to go. It'll be in the show notes in case you can't remember that. You can click on the show note link and go straight there and find a coach. Right now, how many coaches do you have,
So
Ian?
7, including me.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Whether you're running 5K around the block down to the mailbox, or a 250 mile or plus mile race, remember, just all you need is a pair of shoes. Just go out and run.
Moss. No weight vest? Scott, weight vest didn't get in this show.
We had the chance. We were talking about hiking there. It's very easy to
we
bring it up.
were. I wasn't going to do it.